As we all know that UiPath or any RPA tool works with the user interface, right? And to automate specific actions in the user interface, you are required to interact with various windows, button, drop down, list, calendars, and many. Most of the application do this by relying on the screen position of UI element, a method that is not at all dependable. To overcome this problem, UiPath uses a concept called selectors. Selectors are nothing but a graphical representation of that interface element stored in a DOM structure. When I say DOM, that means document object modeling. That is nothing but an Excel based document that is generated for each application, whether it is a web based application or desktop application or SAP based application. All applications have their internal structuring. Let's talk about a desktop based application. So desktop based application can have a windows. Inside that window there could be a different panels. In those panels there could be different labels, and then inside that label or inside that particular panel there could be input, there could be submit button, date picker, list, drop down, radio box, checkbox, and all those things, right? They are stored in a DOM based hierarchy. Most of the time, selectors will be automatically generated by UiPath Studio when you identify the element on which you need to work upon. But there are cases where you need to tweak the selector so that your automation do not break. If your application is static, fields are static, forms are static, and they do not change frequently, UiPath Studio will be automatically able to give you the stable selector. But what about if the selectors that is being provided by the application contains some dynamic values, or those values are changing every time you refresh a screen, or it contains on the basis of data that is being rendered on that particular screen? In all of those scenarios, you need to optimize the selector in such a way that it should not break. I have seen many examples where my developers working in a dev based application, I mean dev instance of an application, they build the automation, and when they move the code into production, bot fails. Reason being, it is not able to identify the element which is being identified in a dev. And most of the time, the problem is due to the wrong selection of selector attributes. So we'll briefly touch base upon all of these things. What is selector editor? What are the properties? How you should be able to build a selector which is stable, and then lot of other properties. For interview purpose, keep in mind that every selector have their attribute and each attribute has their assigned value, right? So you have to make a selector in such a way that assigned value should represent a unique identifier. So if it is representing a unique identifier, you should be able to use that element in your automation pretty much easily. To make it more simpler, what you need to do is you need to pick attributes with the constant values. If the values of attributes keep changing, the selector cannot identify that element properly. So if the value of attributes are changing, You need to design a selector in such a way using regex or using variable so that you can also pass a dynamic value to that attribute of that particular selector so that it can change automatically at runtime. So we'll look at all of these things in example, right? So this is basic about the selectors. Now let's look about UiPath Explorer. What is UiPath Explorer, right? And how we should be able to build our selector. As I discussed in a previous slide, UiPath selectors are basic building block when you want to perform certain operation or certain action on UI elements. To identify the selector or to build a selector, a tool which is called UiExplorer is being given by UiPath. You should be able to launch this using two methods. One from inside Studio, another one is from the tools sections in the menu of UiPath Studio. I'll showcase that, don't worry. Now, once that UiPath Explorer will open, it will represent a screen similar to what I have shown in the right side of a slide. So you have a visual tree, and then you have a properties, and then you have a selector editor, and beside that selector editor, whatever the values that you have selected, in the box number 4, you could see will be listed here. And on the basis of selections, on the basis of checks that you perform in a selector editor or in a selected item, a list of selectors would be generated in panel number 3. And that will be used inside your automation to identify the element correctly. The bottom part of UiPath Explorer enables you to view all the nodes of a selector, right? All you need to do is you need to uncheck or clear the checkbox in front of them so that you do not include unnecessary, unrequired selector into your automation, right? So that's how we need to do. So let's quickly go to UiPath Studio and see how they works. All right. So for this, I'll open up UiPath Studio and I'll help you to explain from there. All right. So let's launch the UiPath Studio first. Okay. As I told you, you should be able to access the UiPath Explorer from Tools, Apps, from here, or from inside the project as well. So let's quickly launch this from here. This will comes like this. And then it will show you all the applications and everything that is running here. So let's take example of Teams. So the moment you select it, it will show you the sum of the properties, right? And these properties has to be used inside your UiPath automation activities. Either you can write them directly here by using this, but there is a better way or easy way of doing it is click on indicate element. So the moment you click on indicate element, it will ask you to select whatever the item you want to identify. So let's, do one more thing. We have this browser. What I wanted to do is I want to identify this particular email text. So I'll click here. So the moment I'll click here, you will see a nicely formatted, list of selectors has been appeared. This contains a visual tree, which is nothing but a parsing of a HTML. So if you understand how HTML works, you should be able to see head, body, then these are iframes, which is basically used by Google Ads, and then there is a desktop Grammarly plugin and all those things. And then inside the body, you should be able to see There are multiple sections, and inside that sections and all those things, you should be able to look at it. To identify the element correctly every time, you need to play around the properties. You should be able to select all of these. It's not that you will not be able to, but you need to work in such a way that it should identify the element correctly. So if you look at the app is, ms.age.exe, that should be okay. Title is RPA UiPath free practice test quiz 3. What if the title of the page is 2? So in those scenario, if the title of the page will change, this selector will not work, right? So for those, what we can do is we can use a dynamic way of identifying a selector, right? Using the regex concept. So we have two types of regex identifier that we can use is star and question mark. So for here, I'll use star and I'll remove these things like this one. So I should be able to do those things. We'll talk about these in more detail, but let's look at how the panel works first. If you want to add any additional property, you should be able to select it from here. So the moment you click a name, email would come here. And the moment you select name, it will come here, parent ID here, title like here and all those things. Title we already have, so we don't need to do. We have a CSS selector as well, right? So this way you should be able to build identifier. Now, these all things are given by UiPath, right? And some of these will work directly, but some of these will not work. So what all things you need to consider while building a sector, we'll look at the next slide. Before that, I wanted to explain you one concept which is usually been asked in a UiPath interview is difference between partial and full selector, right? And I'll show you the example as well. So what is a full selector and what is partial selector? When we say full selector, it contains all the element needed to identify a UI element, including a top level window, right? Including a top level window. It's usually generated by the basic recorder, recommended when you are switching between the multiple windows. So the example that is shown here at the top, if you look at the selectors, we have included the windows detail, name of the window detail, and then the control and all those things. And here in the partial selector, it is being generated by the desktop recorder. It do not contains information about the top level window. Activities containing the partial selectors are enclosed in a container called attached browser and attached window that contains the full selector of the top level window. Remember the difference. To use a partial selector, you need to use a container, right? Because the container will contains the information required for the parent window. When you build a selector which contains everything, that means it's a full selector. And when you create a selector which is partial, usually done when you are dealing with attached browser and attached window. So the top window will contain the first line. See, it is disabled, it is gray, while here all three are in the same, right? You look at this, the one I am highlighting with the mouse. So this is so when to use what and what is the benefit of using full selector versus partial selector? Do any one of you have idea when should we use full selector or when should we use partial selector? Any guess? And this is an interview question, guys. So it will be asked in an interview. Anyone? Any guess?
Like we are using type info activity.
Mm-hmm.
So at that time we are using full selector.
Full selector. Okay.
And then we have condition to change the selector. So at that time we are using partial.
Sorry guys, I was speaking on mute. So any other difference when to use what?
If we are you if we need to click on some element which is changing dynamically and we need dynamic selector, there we can use partial selector, will be more accurate in that case.
See, I'll let me explain it again. Partial select. Yeah, Amar, please go ahead. Yeah.
Full selectors are used to single activity and partial selectors are used to more than one activity.
Right. So let me tell you. If you look at both the selectors, they are same. They are same. They do not have any differences, right? So partial selector and full selectors are at the end, they are same. It's only a way to avoid repetition, right? So say for example, you are working on a one web page, right? Right? And in that web page, you need to click on 5 elements. Okay. So you need to create a selector for 5 elements. So every time you create a selector for those 5 elements, some common attributes will be will be there, right? That's for the top element. That's for the window. So in those scenario where you need to work on multiple elements on same screen, always use attach browser or attach window so that the repetitive selector will go there. And the selectors which uniquely identify those elements only will be required to capture during the partial selectors. But when you are dealing with only one element on one page, or you are changing windows in between, I mean, you are clicking on one window and then going to next window and then clicking one element, in those cases, full selector would be good way to do it. Right? I'll showcase you an example so you don't need to worry about it. I hope I'm able.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
We are using data scraping. At that time we have multiple pages. So our selector is also changing. So at that time we are using partial selector, right?
Yes, because if you look at anything which works as a container anywhere, you are putting a container outside the activities. Container, you understand, right? We have seen example in Excel example today morning. So we have an Excel application scope that works as a container, right? To hold all other related activities inside, right? So there we can use a partial selector. I'll showcase you an example. Let's quickly go into UiPath Studio and build it. But I wanted to, explain this concept so that we can start first. So let's quickly go to the start, create a process. Let's call selector example. Right? So open a main window. Okay. Now let's say open application. Okay. So open application will come. And now indicate a window on a screen. So before doing that, I need to open a notepad. So notepad is open here, right? Now I need to indicate on screen. So I need to indicate on notepad. So I have indicated on notepad. Now you click here and you can click edit selector here, or you can. So when you click on edit selector, a small window will come and that will showcase whatever you have selected. Whatever you have selected. Right? So that will be, or when you click on Open Explorer, it will open the same window that I have shown you a few minutes back. So this will be like here. And Notepad is a basic application, so you don't see much options available here. But if you work on different application, you have a different activity. Other thing that you need to do here is you need to test the selector if they are working or not. So you can use this highlight button here. So when you click on highlight, it will highlight the application that you are using. And when you stop highlighting, it will stop highlighting. Not this one. Okay. So this is this one. Now inside the notepad, I need to click on file menu. Okay. So clicking a file menu, I'll use a click activity. Okay. Click mouse. Now I need to indicate again here on file menu. So I need to click on file. The moment I click, another selector will be generated. And now look at the selectors. So can you see this? This piece is disabled. I'm not able to change it. And this is a concept of partial selector. So this time, whatever the selector it had generated the partial selector. Only these two lines. This line, which is the first line, it is taken care from this open application notepad. So this is a concept of partial selector. So this is a partial selector. It doesn't contain the information about its top and parent application. It is by default added, right? Let's go outside this one and again use a click activity and indicate on screen and click on this file, right? Same thing without using open application. Now you look at the selector. So this time it has generated all three, right? This is full selector. Got my point? I hope I'm able to make this clear to you guys now.
Yeah, now it's clear for me. Thank you.
Yeah. So whenever the concept is pretty simple. Whenever you are using multiple activity on a same window, UiPath Studio will generate partial selector. When you are using for a single activity, it will generate a full selector. So say for example, here, if I want to use another click, right, indicate element, I need to click on edit button. Then the new selector will be generated. And again, this selector will be a partial selector. And this is common. This is for this one as well, because this is being inherited from here. Right? Pretty simple. All right, guys. So let's move to the next point. Okay, so I help you to explain the full selector and the partial selectors. And now we need to look at the dynamic selectors. All right. So dynamic selector, there is a few new things which are being added in a UiPath, which is called fuzzy search, reject search, non-greedy search, and all those things. Those we will discuss when we discuss object repository concept that we'll discuss tomorrow. Right? So we'll discuss about how you should be able to use the concept of object repository, where you should be able to create a library of UI element. When I say library of UI element, that means let's take a scenario that in your organization, SAP application is being used in most of the automation. Instead of identifying same window again and again into different processes, what you can do is you can create a library using object repository so that all the required UI elements will be stored in that library, and then that library will be used in all of your projects. That uses the concept of reusability, so that you should be able to reuse the selectors that you have built for one application once to be used in multiple processes. Other benefit would be if there is a change in application, if application is being updated or upgraded, right, or there is a change in UI, you should be able to modify the values of selector into your library project. And the moment you publish your new library, all of your automation should work. Otherwise, it will be a problem to go and modify the selectors for each activity into all of those processes. So that's the beauty of object repository. And we'll discuss that into a much detail because that's a required concept for the advanced UiPath development. So we'll have a full-fledged session on that tomorrow. Now let's talk what are the other dynamic ways of identifying a selectors. You are asking some in the morning class, someone was asking what about Excel file workbook name is changing. Similarly, we could have a menus names which are changing, right? If one user logs in, menus would be different. Other user logs in, menu would be different, right? So in those scenario where the UI itself is changing for a different user, we need to modify the selector attribute in such a way that it takes value from the variable. Whatever the value that we pass in a variable, on the runtime, dynamic selector will be generated, right? Say for example, if a user is of employee type, there is only one table is displayed and table ID is table 1. But when admin logs into the application, table 2 is generated and the ID for that table is table 2, which contains more number of columns, right? So in those kinds of scenario, we are using concept of dynamic selector. It's pretty simple. All you need to do is you need to create a variable or argument as a property for the attribute of the target tag so that you can allow selector to easily identify the target element based on the values that variable and argument is providing. So that even if there is no exact string match, you should be able to use that into your automation project, right? So let's quickly go to the UiPath Studio again and let's look how we can configure that. So I'll open a UiPath Explorer again, right? And let's indicate element on this one and let's click edit. So this will be given, and now for this name I'll create a variable. Variable name would be menu option. Let's say menu option. So now when the selector will be created, it will, on the basis of menu option that you give, it will be able to click on that particular menu item. Click on save. So here you will see, not, did I modify anyone? I modified some, not. Let that go. Okay, let's do then. If it is not there, let's do it again. Edit selector, click on this, use variable. Variable name is Control K, menu. So it's, let's do, guys, it's not this way. Let's delete this one and create a new sequence file, and then I'll help you to explain. So create a sequence and let's use a assign variable. Okay, and let's create menu. Okay, so I created a, and now first time I'll say file. Okay, and now I'll use click activity like we are doing here, indicate on screen. So I'll select on file, right? Now open this in a Explorer. For the file, you need to create a dynamic variable. So you can create a variable. Good. Or you should be able to choose the existing one as well. It's not necessarily to create. So choose variable. You should be able to select the one that is already defined and you save it. So now the selector will be, you have a new option. Okay. And now based on the value of this one, so if you send file, it will click on file. If you send edit, it will click on edit. So got the concept of this? Should I run this? See, it has clicked on file. Now I change this to edit. Okay, save this, run this again. It's clicked on edit, right? Any doubt here? How to create a dynamic variable? I mean dynamic selector.
Can you please once more again explain this one?
Okay. Anyone have any other doubt? Look, this is a pretty easy example. What I'm trying to do here, based on some variable, I am trying to perform different operation. So if menu name is given as file, it will click here. If it is edit, it will click here. If it is format, it will click here. It will click view and help, right? On the basis of the value that is being stored into it. So what I have done, I have created selector. And the selector, I know everything will remain same. Only thing that will be changed is this one. This will be a variable. So instead of name, what I did is right click and I have done. Sorry, I need to indicate element again for you to explain. Otherwise, you will feel how it is coming.
But Satish, in this case, we are using question mark or star also in selector column.
Where, which? No, we are not using anything. Let me. You are getting confused. So let me open the notepad. Notepad gets closed. That's the reason. So, okay. So edit selector. Where you are saying that we are using star and question mark.
I like menu option where you creating the variable.
No, here we are using a variable called menu O, which is defined here.
Okay, understood.
We are not using. I'll showcase you that example as well. I mean, where we'll use regex, star, and question mark, and all those things. That's coming up next after this example. So let's understand this first. Okay. So if you want to change the values of any attribute dynamically, you should be able to do it. All you need to do is click on the value, right click, and use variable. Right? If you have already defined, or you should be able to create it as well. So that's what you need to do. And the moment you do it, and based on the value, so say for example, this example I am using edit. So what it will do, it will come here and click on edit, this one. And if I pass this as file, it will click on file, because at the runtime, the selector, which is this one, will be changed. This will become as file. And if we pass different value, it will take that value. Got it?
Yeah, got it.
All right. Any other question, guys, before I move to next point, which is using star, question mark, and all those dynamic values? No? Good. Let's create another sequence. And this time will work longer. So I'm creating a new sequence. Now what we need to do here is, we have a website. I mean, RPA.
Start recording.
Recording is already been done, man. I'll give you the, it's already going. Oh, it is not been recorded on Teams. It is recorded on YouTube now.
Oh, okay. Sorry, my bad.
Yeah. All right. So I'll give you these recording. Don't worry about it. So now what we need to do is, we need to create a workflow that will log in into this website. So we are going to create a workflow which will help to log in into this website. That's a basic task we need to perform. And this is a website that is being maintained by us. We create a lot of RPA challenges for you guys to practice. So you should be able to see those challenges once you log in. So we have a couple of challenges and you should be able to navigate through different, these are basically RPA challenge series. So each tab contains a problem that need to be solved using, concept that we are teaching you here. So we have a challenges like you can probably able to search those challenges here on our website. So if you go to the UiPath and then there are those challenges. I have not many. Let me go to the last page. We have some challenge series, I don't know. Anyways, I'll ping you. I need to look at where they are. So there are a lot of challenges. So basically those are, oh, this is here. So okay, so when you go at this website, we have a lot of these RPA challenges are published. So that gives you a problem statement, what you need to do, how you should be able to solve that problem. So you need to perform PDF download, perform data table operation, you need to use queues concept, Excel and invoke code, and then there will be a solution given by it, right? So you should be able to download the solution and all those things. So there are a lot of challenges we have published. We have as of now 5. We have removed a couple of them from last year because UiPath has changed working of AI center and all those things. So we are building them again. But these are really good example that help you to understand how automations work. So it will give you a problem statement like log in into the website, navigate to this system, perform these tasks. And when you do these things, you'll face a lot of challenges like how to do T plus 45 days comparison, how to click on calendar, how to calculate the taxes, those kind of things, right? So these are problem statements that need to be solved. Okay, so you should be able to use this. That's I wanted to explain. So now coming back to the problem, what we are going to do is we are going to create a workflow that will log in into this website. And there I'll help you to explain some of the concept of dynamic selectors and the concept of wait element, exist element, and all those kind of stuff, right? So let's quickly look at the theory part first, and then we'll go to practical part. So in the next few section, how we can work with the different types of selectors. So we need to understand how we can find an attached window. We need to find the control techniques so that your UiPath Studio will wait for certain event to happen. Say for example, window has appeared or not, right? Text box is there or not, screen has changed or not, right? We'll also work with mouse and keyboard activities where we'll send input and click on the sum of the button, and then we'll work with handling events. Now, as I was discussing, wildcard symbols are also available while building a selectors. So we have 2 options available there. One is asterisk, which replaces 0 or more characters. And then we have a question mark, which replaces a single character, right? With the help of these two, we should be able to deal with dynamically changing attributes of selectors. And I'll showcase you in the example. And then after this, we'll also discuss about some of the best practices that we need to follow. So I'll come back on this slide once we are done with the example in UiPath Studio. We have to work with these type of activities to find a control. When I say control, that means you need to ascertain that something has happened when you click something or when you give an input to move to the next page. Say for example, we are building a login screen. The moment we input, username, password and click on submit button, the screen should change and it should go to the next page, right? But how UiPath will get to know that login is success? So either there would be some message, that message need to be captured in UiPath, or change of a screen that need to be captured so that we ascertain that something has happened, navigation has happened, or a workflow has moved to a next step. So for those things, we need to find controls. We need to find controls on the basis of if element is there. When I say element, that means that could be a button, that could be a box, that could be a message, that could be a label, that could be a form, that could be a table, that could be an image, right? We should be also able to identify children's. We should be also able to identify relative element. We should be also able to identify element using indicate on screen, especially useful in the case of image. If you need to identify that particular image is there or not on that page, right? So these are finding control activity. Similarly, web application sometime could be slow or sometime it could be very fast, right? So what if in your workflow you have given a delay of 2 seconds and then bot is trying to look for an element which is not there, right? So in those particular scenario, there is a better way of doing it. So we can use wait element activity, wait image activity, and wait attribute. These activities is used to wait for certain element to disappear from a screen, right? Using this, we should be able to make our workflow more stable, right? We'll look at these when we create a login form example. Now let's move at mouse and keyboard activity that we're going to use today. We'll input the data, right? So there are 3 mouse activities in UiPath Studio. One is click activities, double click activities, and hover activities. In UiPath Studio, there are 3 types of keyboard activities as well. Send hotkeys, used to send the keystrokes from a keyboard as input to screen. Input to screen, always remember. Send hotkeys will be send input to screen. By default, whatever the field is being active, that input will be received there. But send hotkey will always send keystroke to screen. Then there is another method called type into, used to type into the text in the UI element. So there are certain elements like input box that can receive text. So there we can use type into activity. What if you want to send the password? So there is a method called, or there is activity called type secure text. This activity will be used to send the secure text to the UI element, right? Then there is a famous interview question. What is the difference between different input methods? Right? Send window message and simulate type. How they are different, right? Input actions require you to interact with the opened application, right? And in UiPath, we have 3 types of input method for click and type action. That differs in the terms of their compatibility and capability. When I say compatibility, that means certain applications behave in a different way than what UiPath suggests. To handle those scenarios or input method, we use these input method options. It's recommended to simulate type and click method as it works faster of the 3 and it also works in a background. So even if If you do not want your application to come on the front before it start typing, you can use simulate type method. But if you do not need to send special keyboard shortcuts, because for that it will not work. If simulate type and click method is not working for you, then you can use send Windows message. That's a default one and it's the slowest one, right? You will not understand this unless you face a problem with any application wherever you are trying to type into application but it's not typing, and then you will try to click on some of these options to see if they are working or not, because it's based on the compatibility of your application with UiPath. So there is no golden rule here, but you should try using a simulate type and click method as a first option. If it doesn't work, then use send window messages. Any doubt here? Right. So let's go back to the work that we want to do. Okay. So let's open the UiPath Studio. What we need to do? We need to create a login form. So let's first put a log message. Log message, I'll put opening application. Right, and then what I do, open browser, right? Open browser takes certain properties like what is the browser type, so I'm going to use Edge. Okay, and then I need to give the URL, so I'll give this URL here. So you need to give URL in string, right? Once this is done, what I'll do is I'll first use wait or element exists, or you can use element appear and lot many other ways. It's just to identify that application has been launched. So I'll use element exists. I'll click on this and go to the tabs that I need to work. So I'm checking that this has appeared or not. So I'll check this page is appear or not. So this contains the values. URL is this one and tag is this one. So pretty much, you know, basic thing here, nothing to change, reason being everything is good. And look at the URL. By default, it contains a star in front and a star at the end. So UiPath Studio is smart enough. We are giving the URL which contains auth and login, right? And it contains HTTPS. What if somebody tried to launch with www dot, then HTTPS and all those things? Those things are taken care. So take care of these things. So URL should, in the URL especially, we can use this asterisk symbol to avoid failures. So this is done. Now, what we are trying to do here, we are trying to check if that label is there. So the result will store into a variable called b exists. Okay, if this is there, that means our application has launched, right? So we'll put a if structure here, right? And there I'll put bool exist, that means true. So when application launched, it's here. In application do not launch, it will go here, right? So I'll also copy and paste here, saying, putting in warning, saying issue while launch, right? Now if it is successfully launched, that means this element is there, right? What I need to do next? Tell me guys, you can speak up. What I need to do next?
Click on the username.
click on the username, right? So we need to, do we need to click on, we can directly use in type into, right?
Yeah, type.
Because we can use a click activity inside a type into property. So it will directly click there, right? So type into activities has a property called click before or activate before type, right? So let's do that. So what we need to do is type into, okay? And then we indicate inside a browser, a selector would be generated, and then we'll look at the selector first. So do you think selector need to be modified here? Should we change something?
No.
No, why?
Because we are entering the username
Simply.
So no need to change.
Yeah, this is pretty much a static selector, right? Nothing will change here unless the website is changed, right? So we'll use it as it is. We can validate it, highlight it to see if it is identify uniquely, and then we click on this. Now we need to provide a detail here. So we can pass value hard coded like this one. So what we need to pass? We need to pass username as admin. So we can type admin here as it is. Okay. Or we can create a variable at the top. Say control K user name and then assign a value to admin. Okay, and then we can use username here. By default, this will be stored in generic. If it's taken string, but sometimes it takes generic as well. So you need to make sure that this is a string. Otherwise, what you need to do is you need to convert that into toString. Okay. So even if we do a toString, it will not be a problem. So it's a best practice that you, whenever you type into, convert that into a string. Or sometimes you should also trim the values if it is coming from a different application or different window. So you should take care of leading and trailing white spaces. So you should always trim that. Okay. So you can use trim as well. Any doubt so far? No? What I need to do next? So we need to look at the properties, some of these properties here. So you should be able to activate this, right? If you want to click before typing, you can do checkbox here. So it will click before type, right? If you want to delay between, keys, say for example, it has typed A and you want D to be typed after a few seconds. So you should be able to give those values into here. And if you want to clear the field, you should be also able to check this one, right? So for now, what I have done, I have used activate, click before typing, and empty field. That means it will clear if some values are written already there. Okay. So let's move to next. Next, what we need to do.
Password.
So we have need to type into secure string, secure text, right? Indicate element. Again, go to browser. Click on the password field. So selector, everything is good. Type is password, right? We can highlight it, highlighting perfectly. Okay. So now this time type into here, it shows a text that has to be passed. Here it is not showing. So how will we send the password? So for this, we need to go into properties, right? So what is the secure text? Can we type a password? Can we type a text directly there? Like this is the password.
Yes.
We can create a variable as well. I mean, we can directly. What is the reason? It's saying that it is not able to take this.
Because it's secure text now. So
yeah. So for the secure text, what you need to do is you need to convert the variable type of system.security.secure string, and then only it should be able to take it. You got my point?
Yes.
So let's create a variable. Set control K password. Value should be and we can change the type of variable to what type? Secure string. Right? What happened? Or let's complete the work element and then we'll come back to this point again. Hold on for a second. Otherwise, it will create a problem. So for now, let's disable this and put into a type into activity. I'll come back to this. Wait for a second. I'll explain you. So let's, because I want to, first complete the workflow and then try with these variations. Okay. So type into, then let me pass the password.txt. This is the advanced concept, so I need to explain you why, how to do typecasting and all those things. That's the reason I skipped it for now. Okay, and you should be able to change type to pass. Okay, so let's park this for a few minutes and let's look at click activity first. So next we need to do is click on submit button, which is login here. Okay, so
yes,
click on submit here. Let's look at the selectors. Selectors are all good. Input type is submit. We don't need to do any changes again here. And you should be able to look at other selected details are here. One thing I wanted to highlight you here is many times the selector will contain CSS values. So they will contain values like this, or they will contain values like IDX, right? So we need to avoid these kinds of selectors, right? Because they can change on the basis of layout of the screen. So say for example, if the color is green, it is been identified using the CSS, right? Next time when you visit this page, there might be a slight difference in the color because they have changed the layout, but the name they have kept the same. So that's the reason we should avoid CSS selectors. And we should also avoid class, which is a part of a CSS as well. So we should avoid these types of, instead we can use this AA name login. So this is a programming controlled, variable, which will be used when you pass a data from one page to another page. So AA name would be a better choice instead of using CSS selector and class. So these things you need to keep in mind, and the more you practice with the different types of web application, the more you will get why we should be using these and these are not, right? All right, so let's close this, I mean save this and click OK. Okay, so now we are in the click input. So these are the three things we have done. Now once you are done with this and you click on a button, what will happen? So this page will change, right? This page will change. Or if you put a wrong password, this page will not change. It will show a message here. Say for example, it will show a message here, right? If something goes wrong. Okay. So in those scenarios, what we need to do next is we need to first wait for few seconds. So you can put a deliberate delay, and you can pass the values between in milliseconds. So I have created a delay here to wait for 1 second. 1 second. Okay. And once that has been done, what we can do is again we can use the element exist activity. Element exist activity. Reason being, what we need to do is once user type in this one and this one, right, and log in, this page should come, right? So now we need to identify that we are on this page or not. So how we should be able to identify that we have landed on this page? So we can identify some of the element and we'll check if that element is there. So if that element is there, that means navigation has happened, right? Because the bot will be running in unattended mode. You are not looking at the screen, right? So UiPath script has to be designed in such a way that it should know on which screen it is working, right? So what I'll do here is I'll select the element, this one, which is a menu item, and I'll check selector again. So ID, yeah, this is a good example of selector. So let's look at this one. So we have a IDX here. IDX is again a dynamically generated number given by DOM architecture, right? Document object modeling. Sometimes it will work when your web page is static. But if your web page is not static, you should not use IDX. Say for example, on a page, you are returning a table with 8 rows. So it will contain row IDX 0, row IDX 1, row IDX 2 and all those things, right? But next time when there will be new addition of row, that IDX will be changed. Or if there is a new element added at the top like highlighter saying we are closed on Monday, so that IDX number will change, because IDX number tell how to uniquely identify that element. If there are more than one, what is the number of that particular? So it's saying there are 2 span element on the web page. Out of the 2, this is span element is given number as 2. So that's the reason we should avoid IDX. So what we can do is we should not use this one. We can use a name, and what others we can use? We can use dash. The title is dashboard, and we should remove this IDX to make this more stable, and try to see and highlight. Okay. Or you can also, you should experiment with all of these, right? To make it more stable. You should not only give a, try once and say it is working, it should work. You can always give a multiple try using a different, say for example, I added logo mini. What will happen to this? Let's validate it. Validation is good. And then highlight. It's not highlighting somehow. I don't know why. Let's save and then look at if it is. Okay, got my point. So now, similar to what we have done at the top, what we need to do is we need to put a if else statement. So this element will create another variable called b menu. If it exists, login is successful. Here we put a if condition and we put b menu. If it exists, login is success. else login is failure. Any doubt here, guys? Anything you are not able to understand? Or it's good? Do let me know. Should we try and run this before we move to the next concept? Okay, let's try and run it. Yeah, this worked. Login is success.
Yes.
Any doubt here? Any anything you are not able to understand into this workflow? Guys, feel free to ask me, because if you don't ask, it will be a problem, and later you will identify that I'm not able to do this.
I have one question here. If our resolution of a window, somebody has changed, then that button in which we need to type ID and password, it will not be visible on the page. So,
sorry, could you please ask the question again? I didn't get your point.
Yeah. Can you please go to that login page again?
Yes.
Please log on.
Yep.
Can you zoom this page?
I can zoom it.
Okay. Zoom it that this thing should not be visible. Okay. It went into the bottom. So in that case, the type into will not.
I got your point. This is really an interesting question. I'll explain you. So you are saying like this.
Exactly.
Right. I don't know if it will store the. Let me try to run it. Otherwise, we need to find a way when the browser will contain the required zoom values. Okay. So.
But the web page is out of it now. So
web pages.
There's no chance to change.
No. There are chances to change. We can run a browser at different zoom level. Right. So that's a really good question. Let me explain it. It will help you to understand many things. Okay. So I have put a bookmark here. So if web page do not load in a required zoom, I should be able to do it manually here before I do next step. Okay. So let's quickly close this and run it now. Okay, good. This is in a required, right? Zoom page. Yeah. To avoid accuraciness. So it is in a required form and shape. We wanted to test, right? Now let's continue now. Okay. I do not want to. Do you see this? What happened?
It's working.
Yeah, it is scrolled the page automatically.
Yes. It will work for most of the HTML based application. But for some desktop based application, it will not work.
faced similar challenge. It got failed with different screen settings. So
Yeah.
yeah, the question.
Yeah, your question is perfectly fine. So to avoid these kind of things to happen, what we do is when we design, when we set up an infrastructure, we set the screen resolution of application, and we also set up profile for the browser. Okay, profile for the browser, like Chrome has some of your properties, like when you want to save a file, it should ask pop-up window where the file has to be saved, right? If it will not ask, it will directly download the file automatically. So you'll face these kind of challenges when your application, the moment you click on a file, it will automatically download. It does not ask you to save, right? Or sometime application is launching in a minimized sized. It is not launching in a full screen, right? So for those kind of thing, couple of things we need to do. One thing is we also need to use a maximize window here. Okay, just to avoid. Okay. Other thing that we need to do is we need to test with these kind of structure where you need to change the zoom setting